If you came of age in the 1990s, you probably know this song. That haunting voice, the delicate acoustic guitar, the cello creating this atmosphere of melancholy and beauty. For millions of people around the world, this is the man who sold the world. Nirvana in the voice of Kurt Cobain at the MTV Unplugged on November 1993. And if you're like most people who discovered this song through that performance, you probably thought Nirvana wrote it. The intimacy in Cobain's voice, the way he seems to be confessing something deeply personal, it feels like his song, his words, his pain.
We passed up on the step. We spoke of was and when. Although I wasn't there, he said I was his friend.
But here's the thing, Kurt Cobain didn't write the song. This is David Bowie 23 years earlier in 1970. And when Bowie recorded it, it sounded like this. Heavy, dark, proto-metal. It's from an album that almost nobody bought. It's a song that barely anyone noticed at the time. So how did we get from there to here? How did a forgotten David Bowie deep cut become one of the most iconic moments in MTV history? And why does this particular cover feel so different from the original that millions of people didn't even recognize it was a cover at all? Today, the story about transformation, about how great songs can be reborn. This is about two artists separated by a generation working in completely different styles, who both understood something essential about this song. Because The Man Who Sold the World is at its core a song about identity, about losing yourself, about encountering your doppelganger and not recognizing who you've become. When David Bowie wrote it in 1970, he was searching for his artistic persona, experimenting with heavy rock, not yet the superstar he would become. The song was about selling your identity, your authenticity. Ironic, given that Bowie would spend his career becoming different people. When Kurt Cobain performed it in 1993, he was at the height of unwanted fame, the biggest rock star in the world, uncomfortable with that label, struggling with addiction and chronic pain. And the lyrics? I never lost control. Although I wasn't there, he said I was his friend. This took on this eerie prophetic weight. Welcome to Uncovering the Cover. I'm your host, Diego Pinzon, and today we're gonna talk about more than just tragedy. This episode is about resurrection. It's about how Nirvana's cover gave new life to Bowie's forgotten masterpiece, how it sent a new generation of music fans back to discover Bowie's catalog, how both versions, the heavy original and the delicate cover, now stand as classics in their own right, serving different emotional needs, speaking to different moments in our lives, how the same words and melody can mean completely different things depending on who's singing them, and how the greatest covers don't erase the original. They multiply our ways of experiencing a song. This is the story of The Man Who Sold the World, a song that traveled across decades. To understand the song better, we need to go back to 1970. David Bowie, still David Jones from Brixton at heart, was searching for his identity. The world had no idea who Ziggy Stardust or the Thin White Duke were yet, or any of those personas that would make Bowie a legend later. He was just a talented guy trying to figure out who he wanted to be. Space Oddity had been his only major hit so far. But that was already a year. And like a lot of artists in 1970, he was getting heavy. Led Zeppelin was conquering the world. Black Sabbath had just released their debut album. There was this new, darker sound in rock music. And Bowie, well, he wanted in. Enter the men who sold the world. That guitar riff, that's Mark Ronson, who would become Bowie's right-hand man through the Ziggy Stardust era. Together with producer Tony Visconti, they created this churning, heavy sound. It's almost hypnotic. Nothing like the theatrical space-age pop Bowie had been doing until then. The lyrics, they are pure Bowie, mysterious, open to interpretation. The song is about encountering your doppelganger, meeting yourself, selling your identity. Bowie later said that he was influenced by science fiction writer Robert Heinlein. But really, it's about that fundamental question. Who are you when you strip away all the personas, all the performances? Ironic, right? This from a guy who would spend his entire career becoming different people.
Shook his hand and made my way back home. I searched for home and land. Oh, yeah.
The album came out in November 1970 in the US. The UK release waited until April 1971. And here's where things got very interesting. The US version had this cartoon cowboy on the cover. Safe, conventional, kind of boring. But the UK version? Bowie is lying on a chaise lounge at Cliveden Estate, wearing a dress. A men dress, as he called it. Long hair flowing, striking a pose. This was 1971 in the UK. Record stores didn't know what to do with it. Some refused to stock it. But for Bowie, it was the beginning of this gender-fluid, sexually ambiguous public image that would define glam rock. However, nobody was listening. The album flopped. It didn't chart. Radio ignored it. Critics were confused. Was this rock? Was it heavy metal? Was it art? Nobody could figure it out. So they just moved on. Bowie would have his breakthrough the next year with Hunky Dory and then the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. But The Men Who Sold the World, the album and the song, became this cult favorite that only real Bowie heads knew about. And that's where it stayed for over 2 decades. Welcome to 1993. Nirvana is the biggest rock band on the planet. Their album Nevermind has sold over 10 million copies. Smells Like Teen Spirit has redefined what rock music can be. They have just released their third album, In Utero, which debuted at #1 with Heart-Shaped Box as its lead single.
I wish I could eat your cancer when you turn back. Hey, wait, I got a new Cobain. Forever dead to your prices and lies. Hey, wait, I got a new Cobain.
But Kurt Cobain is struggling. He's dealing with chronic pain, addiction, and the weight of being called the voice of a generation. A label he never wanted. A label he never asked for. What a lot of people don't know is that Cobain is a massive David Bowie fan. He grew up listening to Bowie. In interviews, he talked about Aladdin Sane, Diamond Dogs. And he had been playing The Men Who Sold the World in concerts since 1990, usually as a set closer, usually to confused audiences who did not recognize the song. In late 1993, MTV approached Nirvana about recording an Unplugged performance. This was a big deal. Unplugged had featured everyone from Eric Clapton to Paul McCartney to Sting to Mariah Carey to Bruce Springsteen. It was huge. It wasn't the first time that a grunge or a punk artist had been invited for such a feat. The Cure, Pearl Jam, and Stone Temple Pilots had already done it, but when the day came, the production team was concerned about how chaotic it could be for the Nirvana members to play their instruments toned down. Here's MTV Unplugged producer Alex Coletti talking about it.
I was really worried about Dave Grohl. Dave is a heavy drummer. I had sent a PA out to a music store to get brushes and these things they call sizzle sticks. They're little percussive sticks. They're a bunch of dowels wrapped together, and they're much softer. So I don't know what came over me. It was around the holidays. I took some wrapping paper, I wrapped it up, and when Grohl came in, I was like, "Merry Christmas." And he opened it up and he goes, "Wow, I never had brushes before, cool."
MTV wanted Smells Like Teen Spirit. They wanted Come As You Are. They wanted all the hits. But Cobain said no. He wanted to do something completely different. He wanted to showcase the music he loved, the influences that had shaped him. He wanted to prove that Nirvana wasn't just grunge. They had depth. They had history. The performance was at Sony Music Studios in New York City. The set was decorated with stargazer lilies and candles. It was Cobain's idea, going for this intimate, almost funeral atmosphere. Here's producer Alex Coletti again.
And he was the one that suggested the stargazer lilies, those white, the big white lilies. I think it was me. It wasn't Kurt, although it makes the story better. I was like trying to get a handle. I was like a funeral. And he said, yeah, like a funeral. That'd be cool. So it wasn't Kurt certainly foreshadowing, but it was kind of, when you watched it back, it certainly felt that way.
To go along with the vibes he wanted, Cobain put together the set list. Only 5 Nirvana songs, including obscure B-sides, covers of the Meat Puppets with the Kirkuk brothers joining them on stage, a lead Belly song, a Vaseline song, and one David Bowie deep cut. When bassist Chris Novoselic mentioned The Men Who Sold the World to MTV producers, they literally asked, "Who plays that song?" That's how forgotten the song was. Even MTV didn't know it was a Bowie track. Let's dive into what Nirvana did here. They took Bowie's churning, heavy, proto-metal track and transformed it into this delicate, haunting meditation. The tempo is dramatically slower. Pat Smear on acoustic guitar, picking out the melody with this precision and delicacy. Laurie Goldstone on cello, adding this layer of atmosphere and melancholy. Chris Novoselic on bass and accordion. Yes, accordion. But the real transformation is in Cobain's voice, where Bowie performed the song with theatrical detachment, almost like he was telling someone else's story. Cobain sounds like he's confessing something. It's intimate, vulnerable, almost fragile. The lyrics take on this completely different meaning. I never lost control. Cobain sings it like someone barely holding on. We passed upon the stair. We spoke of was and when. Sounds like a ghost story. Although I wasn't there, he said I was his friend. Pure dissociation.
Years and years I roamed. I gazed and stared. We must have million years. I must have died alone. A long, long time ago. Who knows? Not me. I never lost control. Your face to face with the man who sold the world.
The band performed The Men Who Sold the World as the third song in the set. By all accounts, it was one of the strongest performances of the night. Cobain was focused, the band was tight, and something about that song, about its themes of identity and disconnection, seemed to resonate with where Cobain was at that moment in his life. The Unplugged episode aired on December 16th, 1993. The response was overwhelming. But 6 months later, the performance took on its full tragic weight.
Hi, I'm Kurt Loder with an MTV News special report on a very sad day. Kurt Cobain, the leader of one of rock's most gifted and promising bands, Nirvana, is dead, and this is the story as we know it so far. Cobain's body was found in a house in Seattle on Friday morning. He was dead of an apparently self-inflicted shotgun blast to the head. Police found what is said to be a suicide note at the scene, but have not yet divulged its contents. Cobain, who was 27, had reportedly been missing for about 6 days, according to his mother.
Kurt Cobain died on April 5th, 1994. He was 27 years old. Despite a new independent forensic investigation that stated in February 2026 that Cobain's death could have been a homicide, the Seattle Police Department has not reopened the case at the time of this recording and still classifies Cobain's death as a suicide. 7 months later, after Cobain's death, MTV and Geffen released MTV Unplugged in New York as an album. It debuted at number 1. It went on to sell over 5 million copies in the US alone. And suddenly, millions of people were listening to The Men Who Sold the World, most of them for the first time. Most of them thinking it was a Nirvana original. Most of them hearing in Cobain's voice something unbearably prophetic. Before we continue with the episode, if you or anyone you know has been struggling recently, please know that you all are not alone. There are ways to help. You can find support by calling or texting to 988 if you live in the United States. That's 988 on your phone if you live in the US. Additional resources are available on the show notes of this episode. For years after Nirvana's Unplugged album was released, young music fans genuinely believed Nirvana wrote The Men Who Sold the World. Why wouldn't they? It was on a Nirvana album that sold out. It sounded like Kurt Cobain was pouring his soul out. David Bowie told a story about playing a concert in 1995, I think it was in the UK, and introducing the song by saying, "This is a song by a great artist named Kurt Cobain." The crowd went wild. Then he smiled and added, "Actually, this is a song I wrote called The Men Who Sold the World, but Kurt did a wonderful version." Bowie was never bitter about it. How could he be? Cobain had taken his forgotten deep cut and made it immortal. He even had a beautiful reflection about it years later. This is what Bowie said in 1996 to a Dutch TV station.
It's a very sad rendition, of course, because it's so tied up with his own life and death. So it takes on all these different shades for me. Because I also remember fairly clearly my state of mind when I was actually writing it, which was, I guess, as near to a mystical state that a 19-year-old can get into. And I remember it was at a time when I was sort of studying Buddhism, for my 15 minutes of Buddhism. So it's interesting that it changed. It really had two mystical states: the time that I wrote it and recorded it, and the time when he wrote it. When he wrote it again, when he recorded it, and the things that led up to his end after that. So I guess it still retains for me a sense of the mystical.
After Nirvana's version became huge, Bowie's original album, The Men Who Sold the World, started charting for the first time in over 20 years. It was reissued. New generations of music fans went back and discovered Bowie's back catalog. And here's the beautiful thing. Both versions are incredible. They serve completely different purposes though. Want something heavy and mysterious? Go for Bowie's original. Want something intimate and heartbreaking? Go for Nirvana's cover.
We passed up on the step. We spoke of was and when. Although I wasn't there, said I was his friend, which came as a surprise. I spoke into his eyes. I thought you died alone a long, long time ago. Oh no, not me. We never lost control. The face to face of the man who sold the world.
Same lyrics, same melody, completely different emotional experiences. The Man Who Sold the World has been covered dozens of times since Nirvana's version. Seu Jorge did this beautiful Portuguese bossa nova version for Wes Anderson's film The Life Aquatic. There's a version by Lulu from 1974 that actually charted higher than Bowie's original. Mitch Ure did a synth version in the 80s. But the Nirvana version is the one that changed everything. It proved that you could take a 23-year-old cult favorite and make it feel urgent and necessary. It showed that great songs can be reborn, can find new meanings, can speak to new generations. This is what a great cover does. It doesn't try to imitate the original. It doesn't compete with it. It finds something new in the DNA of the song. A different emotion, a different perspective, a different truth. Bowie's version is about alienation and identity from an artistic, almost philosophical perspective. Nirvana's version is about those same themes, but filtered through the lens of fame, addiction, and mortality. Both are perfect. Both are essential. On Spotify today, Bowie's original has been streamed tens of millions of times. So has Nirvana's cover. YouTube is filled with people arguing about which version is better. And that's exactly how it should be. Because great songs, truly great songs, don't belong to just one artist, one arrangement, or one interpretation. They belong to everyone who hears something true in them. From David Bowie's heavy proto-metal experiment in 1970 to Kurt Cobain's fragile acoustic meditation in 1993, The Man Who Sold the World traveled 23 years and transformed completely along the way. It's a song about selling your identity, performed by two artists who constantly reinvented themselves. It's a song about disconnection that connected millions of people. It's a song that was barely heard when it was new and became unavoidable when it was rediscovered. And that's the magic of covers. They give songs second lives, third lives. They prove that great art doesn't have an expiration date. It just waits for the right artist, the right moment, the right interpretation to bring it back to life. This is Uncovering the Cover. I'm your host, Diego Pinzon. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. And if you want to support the show, subscribe, rate us, and leave us a review. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Uncovering the Cover or Uncovering the Cover Podcast. New episodes drop weekly. Subscribe now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. This is Uncovering the Cover, the podcast that explores the hidden stories behind music's greatest transformations. Because every cover is a conversation. Every transformation tells a story. Until next time.